The family reunion had been planned for weeks, a rare occasion when everyone could gather under one roof. I had spent the entire morning preparing, carefully selecting recipes passed down through generations, ones I knew would bring comfort and joy to the table. As the aroma of simmering sauces and freshly baked bread filled the house, I felt a familiar warmth settle in my chest. Cooking was not just a skill to me. It was an expression of love, a language I spoke fluently. When the guests began to arrive, the room buzzed with laughter and chatter. My son, David, greeted everyone with his usual easy charm, while his wife, Melissa, floated in like a delicate breeze, her smile polite but distant. I noticed how she glanced around the kitchen, her eyes briefly landing on the pots and pans, a slight curl of disdain flickering across her face, before she masked it with a practiced smile. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just adjusting to the chaos that comes with big family gatherings. Dinner was served, and I carefully placed each dish on the table. The roasted chicken was golden and fragrant, the mashed potatoes creamy, and the green beans tossed with toasted almonds. I watched as everyone took their seats, eager to see their reactions. My heart swelled when my grandchildren eagerly reached for the mashed potatoes, their faces lighting up with delight. But then, just as I had feared, Melissa's voice cut through the room with a sharpness that made my skin prickle. "Is this really the best you could do?" she asked, loud enough for half the table to hear. Her tone was dripping with condescension, the kind that stings because it's so unexpected. The room fell silent. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes darted between us, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. I kept my hands steady, my expression calm, but inside, a storm was brewing. I had anticipated some skepticism. Melissa had never been one to hide her opinions, but this was more than a passing critique. It felt like a deliberate challenge, a way to belittle not just my cooking, but me. My son's brow furrowed, and I caught the worried glance from my daughter-in-law's sister, who sat quietly beside her husband. The family dynamics, always delicate, seemed to teeter on the edge of fracture. David's voice was gentle, an attempt to soothe the tension. "Mom, it's all good. Melissa just has a different palate." I nodded, forcing a smile, though the sting of humiliation remained. The other family members exchanged uneasy glances, some quick to change the subject, others casting sympathetic looks my way. I could see the divide forming, the subtle alliances being drawn. Despite the hurt, I chose silence. There was no need to escalate the moment. I knew my worth wasn't defined by one woman's dismissive remarks. What they didn't know, and what Melissa could never have guessed, was that beneath my quiet demeanor lay a lifetime of achievement. For years, I had built a name for myself in the culinary world, not just as a passionate cook, but as a successful restaurateur. My recipes, the very ones Melissa mocked, had been the cornerstone of a thriving business that catered to discerning palates across the city. But I had never flaunted this part of my life in front of my family. I wanted them to see me as their mother and grandmother, not just a businesswoman. I wanted my son and his wife to appreciate me for who I was, not for what I had accomplished. That was my choice, and now, in this moment of quiet humiliation, I held on to it like a secret weapon. As the evening wore on, the mood remained tense. Melissa's remarks echoed in my mind, but I refused to let them define the night. I observed the family around the table, The subtle shifts in posture, the whispered exchanges behind cupped hands. No one else spoke of the food, but the undercurrent of judgment was palpable. My son's protective gaze met mine once more, a silent apology in his eyes. I shook my head gently, signaling him to let it pass. This was not a battle to be won with words tonight. I would wait, and when the time was right, I would reveal the truth that had remained hidden for so long. For now, I remained the quiet grandmother, the woman who had prepared a humble meal and endured an unkind critique. But inside, I was already plotting my next move. This was not the end of the story. It was merely the opening chapter. The family didn't know it yet, but I held the power to shift their perceptions, to command respect not through confrontation, but through revelation. As the plates were cleared and the guests began to disperse into the living room, I caught a glimpse of Melissa's face, her usual confident mask slipping just for a moment, replaced by something I couldn't quite decipher. Regret? Surprise? Or perhaps the faintest hint of doubt? I let the moment linger, knowing that the next time our paths crossed at the family table, the dynamics would be different. I would no longer be the silent figure in the kitchen. I had a story to tell, and it was one they would never forget. For now, I excused myself quietly to the kitchen, the echoes of the evening's tension fading behind me. The familiar smells surrounded me like old friends, grounding me. I ran my fingers over the well-worn countertop, the place where dreams had been kneaded and shaped over the years. The family may have seen me simply as a grandmother who cooked an ordinary meal, but I knew the truth. I was the woman who had turned those very recipes into a culinary empire, and when the time came, I would show them exactly who I was. The next day, the atmosphere at the family gathering was palpably different. The warmth and laughter that had filled the room the evening before were replaced by a thick layer of discomfort, especially every time Melissa opened her mouth. She seemed intent on picking apart every dish I had served, her critiques sharper and more public than before. It was as if she had taken it upon herself to undermine me in front of everyone, and I was determined to bear it quietly, though each comment felt like a sting. As we gathered around the table once again, I noticed the way Melissa's eyes scanned the spread with thinly veiled disdain. "I don't understand how anyone could enjoy this stew," she remarked loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's almost like it was thrown together without much thought." The words fell heavy in the air, silencing the conversations around us. My son, David, shifted uneasily in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with her tone, but he said nothing. I met Melissa's gaze calmly, refusing to let her rudeness unravel me. Inside, though, I felt the familiar ache of being dismissed, not just as a cook, but as a woman whose efforts were being belittled in her own home. The other family members exchanged quick glances, some shifting in their chairs, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. The tension was tangible, a silent battle playing out beneath polite smiles and forced nods. Melissa continued, undeterred. "And these rolls, are they homemade? Because they taste like something from a cheap bakery." Her words were sharp, and the way she said them left no room for doubt that she meant to wound. I bit back a retort, knowing that responding in anger would only fuel the fire. Instead, I reminded myself of the years of patience and perseverance that had taught me to hold my ground without losing my dignity. Her remarks weren't just about the food. They carried an undercurrent of superiority, a belief that she was somehow above the traditions and skills I had spent a lifetime cultivating. It was as if my kitchen, my heart, and my history were being dismissed as irrelevant or outdated. The family's mood shifted with each of her comments, the initial excitement of gathering fading into an uneasy silence. David finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "Melissa, please. Let's not make this about the food. It's about family." His words were a plea for peace, but Melissa seemed unwilling to relent. She crossed her arms and leaned back, a smirk playing on her lips. "I'm just being honest," she said. "If we're going to pretend this is a celebration, it should at least taste good." The room fell into an uncomfortable hush. I felt the eyes of my relatives on me, some filled with sympathy, others with surprise at the boldness of her disrespect. Yet no one stepped forward to defend me, and I understood why. Family dynamics were delicate, and Melissa's role as the new wife gave her a certain influence that made others hesitant to challenge her. I kept my composure, reminding myself that strength often lay in silence. But beneath that calm exterior, my mind was racing. I thought of all the years I had poured into my craft, the early mornings and late nights spent perfecting recipes, the countless sacrifices that had built my reputation. To have it dismissed so casually was a blow, but also a challenge I was determined to meet. Throughout the meal, Melissa's sarcasm continued, her comments laced with a subtle cruelty that made it clear she wanted to provoke a reaction. She questioned the freshness of the vegetables, the seasoning of the gravy, even the temperature of the soup. Each jab was a test, and I refused to take the bait. The other family members' discomfort grew, and I saw a few exchange glances that said more than words could. Some seemed to side silently with me, others perhaps unsure where their loyalties should lie. It was as if the dinner table had become a battleground for unspoken conflicts, with Melissa as the provocateur. Despite the tension, I noticed my son's quiet frustration. David was torn between his loyalty to his wife and his respect for his mother. I understood his position. It was not easy to navigate the fault lines forming within the family, but I also knew that allowing disrespect to go unchecked would only embolden Melissa further. As the meal drew to a close, I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment to gather my thoughts away from the charged atmosphere. The familiar surroundings offered a refuge, the scent of herbs and spices grounding me. I ran my hands over the counter, remembering the journey that had brought me here. The struggles, the triumphs, the long nights of dreaming and working towards something greater. Melissa's words still echoed in my mind, but I refused to let them define me. I knew the value of what I had created, even if it was hidden from this family for now. I had built a legacy that extended far beyond the walls of this house, and no amount of mockery could erase that. Returning to the dining room, I noticed a subtle shift. Some family members were avoiding Melissa's gaze. Others offered me small, encouraging smiles. It was clear that her arrogance was not winning the room, even if it was tipping the balance of the evening. The undercurrent of tension remained, but beneath it lay a growing sense of solidarity with me, quietly building among those who knew the importance of respect. Melissa's final comment as the night wound down was a parting shot. "Maybe next time you should cook something more modern," she said, voice low but sharp enough for me to hear. The room was silent again, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I met her eyes steadily. "Thank you for your suggestion," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "I'll consider it." There was no need to elaborate. The message was clear. I was not intimidated, nor would I be silenced. As the family began to disperse, I caught David's eye once more. His expression was a mixture of apology and concern. I gave him a small nod, a silent reassurance that I was okay. But inside, I was already planning my next move. This was not the end of the story. The true test was yet to come. Melissa's disrespect had revealed more than just her opinion of my cooking. It exposed her attitude toward me and, by extension, the family history I represented. But I was ready. I had weathered storms before, and I would weather this one as well. For now, I would hold my silence, gathering strength and preparing to reveal the truth that would shift the balance. The daughter-in-law's arrogance was a challenge, but it was one I intended to meet head-on. I had a story to tell, and soon, everyone would hear it. The following evening, the family gathered once more, this time in the living room rather than around the dinner table. The air was thick with unspoken words, the tension from the previous day still simmering beneath polite smiles and forced small talk. I knew that the moment had come to break the silence, to reveal the truth that had remained hidden for so long. I cleared my throat gently, drawing the attention of everyone present. Melissa's eyes flicked toward me, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism evident. I could see the faint smirk still lingering on her lips, as if she expected another meek response. But I was ready to shatter that illusion. "I think it's time I shared something important with all of you," I began, my voice steady, but carrying the weight of years lived and lessons learned. The recipes I prepared these past 2 days, the ones that Melissa so candidly critiqued, are not just family traditions. They are the foundation of a business I built from the ground up. A hush fell over the room, the kind that precedes a revelation no one anticipated. I watched as the expressions shifted: surprise, disbelief, and a growing curiosity. Melissa's eyes widened, and for the first time, her confident facade faltered. "I am the founder and owner of a successful restaurant empire," I continued, the pride in my voice unmistakable. "For over 2 decades, I have poured my heart and soul into creating a brand known throughout the city for its authentic flavors and exceptional quality. The very dishes you tasted, the stew, the rolls, the chicken, they are the recipes that made that success possible." David's mouth opened slightly, caught off guard by the revelation. The other family members exchanged glances, some nodding slowly as the pieces fell into place. Melissa sat back, speechless, her earlier arrogance replaced by a stunned silence. "I never shared this part of my life with you because I wanted you to know me as your mother, as your grandmother, not just as a businesswoman," I explained, meeting Melissa's gaze with unwavering calm. "But after the way my cooking was dismissed, I felt it was important to show you who I truly am." The room remained quiet for a moment, the weight of my words settling over everyone like a tangible presence. Then, slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. The power dynamic had flipped. The woman who had been mocked was now standing tall, commanding respect not through confrontation, but through truth. Melissa's voice finally broke the silence, quieter than before. I had no idea. I didn't realize these recipes were part of something so significant." Her eyes searched mine, a flicker of remorse crossing her features. I spoke without understanding, and that was wrong. I nodded, acknowledging her admission without bitterness. It's easy to judge what we don't know. But respect is earned through understanding, not by tearing others down. The family watched intently, the lesson unfolding before them. David reached out, placing a hand on Melissa's arm. Mom has built something incredible, and it's rooted in the very traditions we hold dear. I think we all need to appreciate that more. His voice was firm, protective, and I felt a surge of gratitude for his support. The others began to speak, voices softer, more thoughtful. My sister-in-law smiled warmly, saying, "Your dedication and talent are truly inspiring." We've all underestimated what it takes to build something like this. Even my brother chimed in, his tone respectful and sincere. I think it's time I shared something important with all of you. I began, my voice steady, but carrying the weight of years lived and lessons learned. The recipes I prepared these past 2 days, the ones that Melissa so candidly critiqued, are not just family traditions. They are the foundation of a business I built from the ground up. A hush fell over the room, the kind that precedes a revelation no one anticipated. I watched as the expressions shifted: surprise, disbelief, and a growing curiosity. Melissa's eyes widened, and for the first time, her confident facade faltered. I am the founder and owner of a successful restaurant empire, I continued, the pride in my voice unmistakable. For over 2 decades, I have poured my heart and soul into creating a brand known throughout the city for its authentic flavors and exceptional quality. The very dishes you tasted, the stew, the rolls, the chicken, they're the recipes that made that success possible. David's mouth opened slightly, caught off guard by the revelation. The other family members exchanged glances, some nodding slowly as the pieces fell into place. Melissa sat back, speechless, her earlier arrogance replaced by a stunned silence. I never shared this part of my life with you because I wanted you to know me as your mother, as your grandmother, not just as a businesswoman, I explained, meeting Melissa's gaze with unwavering calm. But after the way my cooking was dismissed, I felt it was important to show you who I truly am. The room remained quiet for a moment, the weight of my words settling over everyone like a tangible presence. Then, slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. The power dynamic had flipped. The woman who had been mocked was now standing tall, commanding respect not through confrontation, but through truth. Melissa's voice finally broke the silence, quieter than before. I had no idea. I didn't realize these recipes were part of something so significant. Her eyes searched mine, a flicker of remorse crossing her features. I spoke without understanding, and that was wrong. I nodded, acknowledging her admission without bitterness. It's easy to judge what we don't know. But respect is earned through understanding, not by tearing others down. The family watched intently, the lesson unfolding before them. David reached out, placing a hand on Melissa's arm. Mom has built something incredible, and it's rooted in the very traditions we hold dear. I think we all need to appreciate that more. His voice was firm, protective, and I felt a surge of gratitude for his support. The others began to speak, voices softer, more thoughtful. My sister-in-law smiled warmly, saying, "Your dedication and talent are truly inspiring." We've all underestimated what it takes to build something like this. Even my brother chimed in, his tone respectful and sincere. Melissa's demeanor changed as well. The earlier arrogance was replaced by a humility that seemed genuine. "I'm sorry for my behavior," she said quietly. "I want to learn more about your journey, and maybe even your recipes." I returned her smile, extending an olive branch. "I'd like that. Sharing this part of my life with you means more than you know." The room felt lighter, the walls that had divided us beginning to crumble. As the conversation flowed, I realized that this revelation was more than just about food or business. It was about family, respect, and the courage to stand firm in one's identity. I had exposed a side of myself that many had not seen, and in doing so, I had rewritten the narrative that had confined me. Melissa's earlier disrespect had been a challenge, but it became the catalyst for a deeper connection. The family's perception of me shifted, and with it, the dynamics began to heal. I felt a renewed sense of empowerment, knowing that my truth had set me free. The evening ended with a warmth that had been missing, a sense of unity forged through honesty and understanding. I looked around the room at the faces of my loved ones, feeling a profound peace. This was not just a victory in the kitchen. It was a triumph of integrity and resilience. Yet, I knew the journey was far from over. There were still conversations to be had, lessons to be learned, and relationships to mend. But for now, I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my place, not just as a grandmother or mother-in-law, but as the woman who had built an empire from her passion and perseverance. The day after my revelation, the household felt different, charged with an energy that was both tentative and hopeful. The previous night's truth had shifted the family's unspoken dynamics, and I could sense the ripple effects in every interaction. But with change came confrontation, as expected. David found me in the kitchen early that morning, his expression serious yet resolute. "Mom, we need to talk," he began, his voice low to avoid waking the others. "About Melissa?" I nodded, already aware that her behavior could no longer be overlooked. "I agree," I replied. "Her disrespect wasn't just about the food. It's about boundaries and respect within this family." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I confronted her last night after everyone had gone to bed. I told her that her attitude was unacceptable and that she needs to understand the importance of humility, especially in a family setting." I appreciated his stance, knowing how difficult it was for him to challenge his wife. And how did she respond? Honestly, she was defensive at first. But after some time, she admitted she had been harsh and promised to try and change. His eyes searched mine. "But we need to be firm. If this behavior continues, it will damage more than just our dinners." I placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "I'm proud of you for standing up for me and for us. It's important we all set clear expectations about respect." Later that day, the family gathered again, this time in a more neutral setting. In the living room, with soft music playing and coffee cups in hand. The atmosphere was quieter, the earlier tension replaced by a cautious openness. Melissa was the first to speak, her voice tentative but sincere. "I want to apologize again for how I acted. I realize now that I was dismissive and unfair. I let my pride get the better of me, and I didn't consider how hurtful my words were." Her apology was met with nods from some family members, though a few exchanged skeptical glances. I chose to accept it, recognizing that genuine change often begins with acknowledgement. I appreciate your apology, Melissa, I said warmly. What matters now is that we move forward with respect and understanding. The conversation turned toward the importance of family unity and supporting one another, especially given the challenges life throws our way. David added, "We're all learning here. It's about building a foundation where everyone feels valued and heard." Melissa nodded, her demeanor noticeably softer. "I want to learn more about your cooking, about the business, and the passion behind it. Maybe even help out someday." I smiled, touched by her willingness to bridge the gap. "I'd like that. Sharing what I love with you all means a lot to me." As the afternoon wore on, more candid conversations unfolded behind closed doors. I found myself alone with David, and we spoke openly about the lessons this episode had taught us. "You've always been strong, Mom," he said quietly. "But seeing you stand your ground like this, it's inspiring. You showed me that being true to yourself and your achievements is something to be proud of, not hidden." I felt a swell of emotion, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you, David. I wanted you to see that success isn't something to be ashamed of, even within family." He smiled. "I'll make sure Melissa understands that too." Our talk was interrupted by the sound of laughter from the other room. Peering through the doorway, I saw Melissa attempting to mimic one of my cooking techniques, her awkward smile betraying her nervousness. Nearby, my daughter-in-law's sister watched with amused encouragement. It was a small but significant moment, the beginning of healing and connection through shared experience. I realized that respect wasn't just about words. It was built through actions, patience, and a willingness to grow together. That evening, as I prepared a simple meal with Melissa's hesitant but eager help, I reflected on how far we had come. What began as hurtful mockery had transformed into an opportunity for growth and understanding. The family, once divided by unspoken judgments, was now slowly weaving new threads of respect and appreciation. Yet, I knew this was just the beginning. Boundaries needed to be reinforced, and lessons about humility and kindness would have to be revisited. But the foundation was set, a foundation built on truth, courage, and the willingness to change. I looked across the kitchen at Melissa, who was carefully chopping herbs, her concentration sincere. I felt a quiet hope that this new chapter would bring us closer, not only as family, but as individuals learning to value each other beyond appearances and assumptions. In these moments, I understood that standing firm in one's identity and experiences was not just about defending oneself. It was about creating space for others to grow and learn. And that, perhaps, was the most important recipe of all. A few days after the family's tense but honest conversations, Melissa approached me in the quiet corner of the garden, her usual confident stride tempered by a softer, more vulnerable air. I was pruning the rose bushes, the fragrance of blossoms mingling with the fresh morning air, when she cleared her throat gently. "May I talk with you for a moment?" she asked, her voice tentative. I set down the pruning shears and smiled warmly. "Of course, Melissa. What's on your mind?" She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize again for how I treated you at the reunion. I realize now how disrespectful and unfair I was, and I'm truly sorry. I've been reflecting a lot on my behavior, and I want to change." Her eyes searched mine, earnest and open. I nodded, feeling the sincerity in her words. "Thank you for saying that. It means a great deal to me. She smiled, a flicker of relief crossing her face. I also want to understand your journey better. I mean, the story behind your cooking and your business. When you shared your success with the family, it changed how I saw you, and I want to learn from you. I felt a warmth spread through me, a quiet satisfaction that my truth had begun to bridge the gap between us. I'd be happy to share. Cooking has always been more than just a skill for me. It's been a passion, a way to connect with people, and a path to building something meaningful. Her interest seemed genuine, and I could tell she was eager to move beyond past misunderstandings. Maybe we could start with a few recipes? You could teach me some techniques, and I could help in the kitchen. I laughed softly, feeling the tension of recent days ease. I'd like that very much. It's a wonderful way to build respect and understanding. Over the next few weeks, Melissa and I spent more time together, cooking side by side and sharing stories. She asked questions about my early struggles, the risks I took, and the satisfaction of seeing my restaurant flourish. I admired her curiosity and growing appreciation for the craft I had dedicated my life to. Through these moments, I saw a change, not just in her attitude toward me, but in the way she viewed the family's traditions and values. She began to embrace the importance of humility and respect, qualities she had once dismissed, but now sought to embody. Our evolving relationship also influenced the wider family. At the next gathering, Melissa was more attentive, her tone kinder, and her words thoughtful. The atmosphere was lighter, the conversations richer with genuine connection. I reflected on how passion and perseverance had not only built my business, but also earned me the respect of my family. It was a reminder that success is not solely measured by wealth or status, but by the integrity with which one lives and the relationships nurtured along the way. In the quiet moments after these gatherings, I often thought about the journey we had all taken, from judgment and misunderstanding to acceptance and growth. It was a testament to the power of truth and the courage to stand firm in one's identity. I no longer needed to hide behind silence or endure disrespect. By sharing my story, I had not only reclaimed my dignity, but also paved the way for healing and connection within my family. And as Melissa and I continued to cook together, laughter and learning blended in the warmth of the kitchen, I knew that true richness lay not in material success alone, but in the bonds forged through authenticity, empathy, and mutual respect. The following Sunday, the family gathered once again, this time at a place none of them had ever been before. It was a bright morning, the kind that seemed to carry a promise of renewal in the air. The sun rose over the city skyline, casting a golden light that danced across the windows of an elegant building downtown. The sign above the entrance read in bold, graceful letters, "Evelyn's Table." Melissa stepped out first, blinking against the sunlight. "This is yours?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I smiled softly, straightening the pearl earrings I always wore. "Yes," I said, "this is mine." Welcome to my world. We walked inside together, and immediately the smell of fresh bread and herbs filled the air. The soft hum of jazz floated through the restaurant, mingling with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. My restaurant was alive, every wall, every corner breathing with the warmth I had poured into it for decades. The sunlight streamed across polished wooden tables, reflecting off framed photos of my journey. Photos they had never seen. There I was, on the walls, a younger me in a white chef's coat, flour dusting my hands, me smiling proudly beside my first restaurant sign, me on the cover of Cuisine Heritage with the words, "The soul of Southern flavor." I heard the quiet gasp escape Melissa's lips. David walked beside her, his eyes full of awe. "Mom," he murmured, "you never told us it was like this." I looked at him and smiled. "I didn't need to," I said gently. "Some stories are meant to be shown, not told." We entered the private dining room I had reserved for them, the same room where so many business deals had been signed, where investors once looked at me with doubt until I proved them wrong. The table was set perfectly, with fresh flowers, silverware that gleamed under the light, and linen napkins embroidered with my logo. My staff greeted me warmly as we passed. "Chef Carter, good to see you." I nodded, my heart swelling with quiet pride. Even now, they still called me chef. When the first course arrived, I watched as my family tasted the food that had carried me through my life. The roasted chicken, the creamy mashed potatoes, the golden rolls brushed with honey butter. The same dishes Melissa had once mocked in my kitchen now sat on fine porcelain plates in one of the top restaurants in the state. I didn't say a word as they ate. I just watched their faces soften, their eyes change, their understanding unfold one bite at a time. Every flavor told a story. The years I spent struggling, the nights I cried alone in a rented kitchen, the mornings I rose before dawn to bake bread for strangers who didn't yet know my name. David reached for my hand. "Mom," he said softly, "I had no idea you'd built something this incredible." I smiled, the kind that comes from deep inside. "That's because I never did it for recognition," I said. "I did it for love. For you, for this family." Melissa's eyes glistened. "I was wrong about you," she whispered. "I judged you unfairly. I thought I knew better, but I didn't know anything about what you'd lived or what you'd built." I reached out, placing my hand over hers. "We all judge what we don't understand," I said kindly. "But it's what we do after we understand that matters most." Her tears fell silently, but her smile told me everything I needed to know. For the first time since that painful dinner, I felt peace between us. After the meal, I took them upstairs to my office, the heart of my empire. The walls were lined with framed awards, articles, and photos of the people who had helped me along the way. On my desk, a brass plaque read, "Evelyn Carter, founder and visionary." Melissa looked around in disbelief. "You built all this?" "Yes," I said softly, "with my 2 hands, a few recipes, and more faith than sense." I watched their eyes land on the reports lying open on my desk. The numbers, the growth charts, the partnerships, the scholarships I funded for young chefs who reminded me of myself. They said nothing for a long time, just stared at the evidence of what quiet persistence could do. "I never knew," David finally said. "All these years, and you were running an empire." I laughed gently. "It started with a single pot of stew," I said. "One meal, one dream, one customer at a time." I walked to the window, looking out at the city below, the city that had once overlooked me and now celebrated me. "When people doubted me, I cooked," I said quietly. "When they laughed at my dreams, I worked harder. And when life told me I was too old, too small, too ordinary, I seasoned my hope and kept going. I turned back toward them. This isn't just my restaurant. It's a reminder that love, when poured into something with patience, can turn into legacy." Melissa came closer, her voice trembling. "You forgive me?" I smiled. "Of course, my dear. Forgiveness isn't earned with words, it's lived with change. And I've seen that change in you." The months that followed were some of the happiest of my life. My family became a part of the business, learning the craft, understanding the heart that pulsed behind every plate. Melissa shadowed me in the kitchen. She learned to taste, to trust her instincts, to cook not just with her hands, but with her heart. Sometimes I caught her looking at me the way a student looks at her teacher, with respect and something even deeper. David handled the business side, updating systems, expanding the brand, ensuring that my legacy would stand long after I was gone. And me? I did what I loved best. I cooked, I taught, I told my story, the real story, to everyone who walked through my doors. I had spent years staying silent about who I was, thinking humility meant hiding my light. But I had learned that sharing your truth is not arrogance, it's service. It shows others what's possible. One evening, we held a gala to celebrate 30 years of Evelyn's Table. The mayor came, so did food critics, community leaders, and families who dined with us for generations. But when I stood on that stage, microphone in hand, I didn't see fame or money or power. I saw faces. Faces of the people I had fed, of the lives my cooking had touched. People often ask me how I built a restaurant empire. I began, my voice calm and steady. They think it's about business. But it's not. It's about love. It's about family. It's about never letting someone else's doubt define your destiny. I looked toward my children and grandchildren sitting in the front row. There was a time when even my own family didn't know who I was. I let them see only the grandmother stirring a pot, not the woman who built a dream. But today, they know. And that's all the success I'll ever need. The applause was overwhelming. Cameras flashed, reporters took notes. But I just smiled, letting the sound wash over me like a hymn. When I stepped down, Melissa met me with tears in her eyes. "You've changed everything," she said. I took her hand gently. "No," I said. "You changed." And that's what makes me proudest. Weeks later, I sat alone in the quiet of my kitchen, not the grand restaurant kitchen with its polished counters and stainless steel, but my own small one at home, the same place where everything began. The evening light spilled through the lace curtains. On the stove simmered a pot of stew, the same recipe that once caused so much pain, now filled with peace. I sat down, breathing in the scent of herbs and onions, and smiled. For the first time in a long time, I felt the fullness of my journey. From a humble home cook to a woman who had built a multi-million-dollar empire. But the numbers didn't matter. The money didn't define me. What mattered was the love that built it all. I thought of all the people I had employed, the scholarships I had funded, the young chefs who called me Mama Evelyn because I reminded them of home. I thought of my son's proud eyes, my daughter-in-law's newfound humility, my grandchildren learning to cook my recipes with laughter and joy. And I realized something. The greatest wealth I ever made wasn't in dollars. It was in hearts. Not long after, I began to step back from daily management. I watched as David and Melissa took the reins with passion and care. They honored my traditions, but brought fresh ideas, new flavors, and new energy. Our restaurants grew across states, our name becoming a symbol of soul, resilience, and authenticity. But even as the business expanded, I stayed grounded in where it all began. That small kitchen, that pot of stew, That moment, I chose love over pride. I often tell my staff, every dish we serve carries a story. Cook like you're telling someone you love them. Because food is memory, and memory is legacy. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the city lights began to sparkle, I stood outside Evelyn's table one last time before closing for the night. The sign glowed softly above me, just as it had on that first day I opened the doors so many years ago. My heart was full of gratitude, of peace, of purpose. I thought about how far I had come, the ridicule, the silence, the pain, and how, through it all, I had found strength not in bitterness, but in creation. I had proven that humility and power could live in the same heart, that forgiveness was stronger than pride, that legacy, like a good recipe, was meant to be shared. As I locked the doors and turned toward the quiet street, I whispered to myself, I did it. I really did it. Not for the fame, not for the millions in the bank, but for the little girl I once was, who believed that love, seasoned with courage, could feed the world. And as the night wrapped gently around me, I felt the warmth of my own story. A story that began in the kitchen, but ended in the hearts of everyone I had ever loved. Because in the end, that was my greatest creation. A legacy that tasted like love.